Let's go back in time to 2008 when the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation started giving grants to a professor at the University of Wisconsin named Yoshihiro Kawauka. Kawauka started doing research into bird flu at that time and has since been doing that, even arguably during the moratorium on gain-of-function research. This is Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation is where this all began, and I want to talk about that today. Gates Foundation gave $1.3 million in 2008 to Kawauka. The purpose of this was to identify mutations in bird flu that could lead to a pandemic. Just to study, just to understand. Later that year, Kawauka unveiled his first tranche of research, saying that we were able to mix and match genes from the original Spanish flu 100 years ago that killed 50 million people, and we put it into bird flu, and we were able to make a very infectious version of this H5N1 bird flu. Specifically, it has to do with using certain genes that allow viruses to propagate in the lungs of mammals and not just in the ear, nose, and throat. You can read from the study here. Kawauka and his group blended genetic elements from 1918 flu virus with those of the currently circulating bird flu, and then we tested it on ferrets. Lo and behold, this allowed the virus to effectively colonize lung cells and reproduce in the lungs of mammals. Way to go, big guy. Back in 2008, you effectively bridged the gap between this highly infectious bird flu and humans, establishing this zoonotic risk about which we've heard so much from Fauci and all of the experts. Well, as you can imagine, Bill Gates was delighted to hear this. He went ahead and gave another $10 million to Kawauka to continue this Frankenstein research. This is 2009 now. Now, this $10 million, the cover story was we wanted to identify virus mutations that would serve as early warnings of a potential pandemic. In fact, the point here was if we found them early, then we could implement social distancing or start vaccine development. Folks, this, again, to be clear, this is 2009, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is already talking about social distancing, about which most of us hadn't heard for another 12 years. Nonetheless, how are you going to identify potential pandemics? Well, specifically, Kawauka was tasked with identifying mutations in viruses that would allow avian influenza, to get over to humans. Somehow, again, they're very interested in getting bird flu into people, into making this infectious. Again, Kawauka was tremendously successful at this mad scientist stuff. He was able to hybridize the H5N1 influenza with the seasonal influenza virus and make something that was highly virulent and capable of infecting people. Of course, he said this is our concern that it could happen, but I went ahead and did it in a lab just to be sure. When tested this new hybrid in mice, the human virus version of the specific gene, PB2, was able to get H5N1 avian flu into a highly pathogenic form that infected mice and ferrets. Now, this actually prompted some pushback from scientists who have any semblance of ethics whatsoever. Here's an article by one Scott McPherson who said, look, I've been really worried about the potential for this hybridization of bird flu and influenza, human influenza, and for whatever reason, this crazy mad scientist Kawauka did it. He went ahead and took $10 million from Bill Gates and made this hugely pathogenic mutation. You can read down here. Kawauka is getting a lot of attention for this research, including more money from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and for whatever reason, he took PB2, the segment that allows influenza to affect humans, and spliced it in to H5N1. The result is a more lethal and even more virulent virus than the parent strain. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the definition, the very definition of gain-of-function research, funded by Bill and Melinda Gates, executed by Yoshi Kawauka.